If there ever is a World War III, it probably won't begin with tanks charging across Europe. It'll start with missiles, drones, electronic warfare detecting and attacking threats before they even leave the base. High-tech systems that look more like something from a science fiction film than a battlefield. And that's exactly what China wanted to show off on September 3rd, 2025, when the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, held its Victory Day parade in Beijing, officially called the Conference to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. Wow, what a mouthful. The parade is an annual event held to mark the defeat of Japan and China's contribution to the end of World War II. But what was on display this year was the threat of starting World War III. The parade was a showcase of brand new weapons, most of them real, but still most of them untested in combat. Some are impressive feats of engineering, advanced drones, laser defense systems, hypersonic missiles. Others are so fresh off the production line or early in development that nobody really knows how they'll perform when it counts. And China has been known to display aspirations instead of real hardware in past parades as propaganda. But that's the catch. With such a secretive and closed-off country as China, and a leader like Xi Jinping, these weapons might be the future of war. While many of them are currently deployed, they might be prototypes still years away from reliability, or they may be fiberglass dreams still on the drawing board. What works in a laboratory might not hold up on the field. A ballistic missile looks terrifying rolling past the cameras, but can it actually hit a moving aircraft carrier that it's aiming for? A lot of analysts say no, not really. This is the paradox of China's parade. Serious technology, but wrapped up in politics and optics. Let's start with the attendees. Basically a who's who of dictators from around the world. You had Vladimir Putin, famous for starting regional wars, by my count 8, and having his enemies thrown from windows. Kim Jong-un, the leader of a poor nation where his people work and starve while his family gets richer and richer. These were the guests of honor and stayed by Xi's side throughout the event. Also in attendance were leaders like Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, whose crackdown on independent voices sent hundreds, if not thousands, of journalists and students to jail. You had Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, who made it his personal mission to squeeze Ukraine from inside the EU on behalf of his friend Vladimir Putin, holding up votes and sabotaging aid, all while his people protest him in the streets. There were several other attendees, but for brevity's sake, let's just cover one more, and my favorite to discuss, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. Vučić has been the target of mass demonstrations in Belgrade following the collapse of a concrete railway station roof in November of 2024. That had been passed for use without inspections due to rampant government corruption and self-dealing. He then attempted to cover up what had happened. This led for calls for a snap election that went unheeded, and the government hired thousands of thugs wearing badgeless and nameless police uniforms to violently disperse the protests, which have only gotten louder until the present. But that's a story for a different day. Suffice it to say, these are not the good guys. So the parade kicks off following Xi's statements about Chinese bravery during World War II, and China will not be bullied by the West. We've heard this all before. The first things to fly by were Harbin Z-20 medium-lift helicopters. This is a utility helicopter, roughly analogous to the UH-60 Black Hawk currently employed by the US Army. In the 80s, China had been able to acquire 24 Sikorsky S-70 helicopters. But the violent 1989 massacre at Tiananmen Square saw China under embargo and ended their relationship with American manufacturing. This led to the need for China to design its own utility helicopter. The 2008 Sichuan earthquake also illustrated the need for a Black Hawk-style helicopter to be used in search and rescue missions after natural disasters. The Z-20 was commissioned in 2006, made its first flight in 2013, and was officially deployed in 2019. There are several variants for both police and military use, from search and rescue to sub-hunting, and even the S-21, a dedicated attack helicopter. Powered by the WZ-10 turboshaft engine, it is slightly more powerful than the Black Hawk, but the Black Hawk is a 1970s design. So the 2006 Chinese helicopter is more modern. If the Black Hawk is any indicator, it should be flying well into this century. One interesting note is that since 2015, China has been working on a stealth version of the helicopter. And following the raid on Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad by Navy SEALs in 2011, Pakistani forces recovered parts of a crashed stealth Black Hawk and likely shared their wreckage with China, earning them years of free research and development. The next flyer in the lineup was the Changhe Z-10 attack helicopter. This is the product of a 1998 program to develop a middleweight attack helicopter for the People's Liberation Army Ground Force Aviation, the flying arm of the PLA Ground Forces, which was established in 1988. By the time it flew in 2003, China's short run of good relations with the West were long gone, ended by the Tiananmen Square massacre, but in that time, they had the opportunity to look at Western designs like the American AH-1 Cobra, as well as the Italian Augusta A-129. With this Western tech under their hats, the Chinese were able to develop the Z-10. Before the Z-10, the PLA-GF relied on the Harbin Z-9 in attack configuration. But the Z-9, which is a license-built Eurocopter Dauphin, is primarily a utility helicopter, and the need for a dedicated attack platform became apparent. In 1995, China commissioned Kamov to develop a preliminary design for the 6-ton helicopter, known as Project 941. But when the initial design was finished, the Chinese took over and finished the design, naming it the Z-10 in 1998. It first flew in 2003 and entered service in 2009. Designed primarily for ground attack roles, it features a tandem cockpit, a composite armored airframe with reduced radar cross-section, and a fly-by-wire avionics suite with helmet-mounted sights, FLIR, radar and laser warning receivers, and electronic countermeasures. The Z-10 was initially armed with a forward-mounted 23mm and later a 30mm cannon, 4 hardpoints capable of carrying up to 16 ATGMs like HJ-10 or AKD-10, TY-90 air-to-air missiles, and unguided rocket pods. It basically fulfills the same role as the AH-64. The Apache, though, is a larger, heavier, and more powerful battlefield heavyweight, with proven combat experience, superior armor, advanced sensors, and a mature, network-centric warframe system, while the Chinese Z-10 is a lighter, more compact helicopter. I'd say in a fight, the Apache takes it. Following the Z-10s came a formation of Z-20T attack helicopters. This is a weaponized version of the Z-20 we talked about earlier, but with hardpoints for rockets and missiles. Picture a flying infantry fighting vehicle, capable of fighting but with a squad of troops inside. Nothing much more to really say about this. After that were some Chenghu Z-8L transport helicopters. First introduced in 2018, the Z-8L is China's indigenous wide-body evolution of the Z-8, which itself is derived from the Aerospatiale SA-321, designed with a substantially widened cabin and revised rear fuselage, so small armored vehicles can drive straight into the hold via a ramp, a capability the earlier Z-8 variants lacked. Put in a global context, the Z-8L fills a mid-heavy niche. It's far smaller than the Russian Mi-26, which is the world's heaviest helicopter, but sits above standard medium-lift types like the CH-47 Chinook and roughly overlaps the payload of the US CH-53K. Now, let's get on to the really good stuff. Rolling out first were the PLA Type 99B main battle tanks, the newest version of China's heavy armor. Type 99B is a formidable improvement on other tanks in the Type 99 family. It weighs approximately 55 tons, and on paper, it's formidable with a 125mm gun, modern sensors, active protection systems, and mobility that rivals top Western tanks. It's based on the Russian T-72, but, like the T-72, the Type 99 family of tanks uses a carousel autoloader, making them susceptible to massive chain reaction explosions when they've taken a hit, just like we've seen with so many Russian tanks on the battlefield in Ukraine. It's an improvement on past Chinese tanks, but like the Russian T-14 Armata, it looks high-tech, but it's untested in real high-intensity combat. The PLA has never fought a major ground war, so it's impossible to know how these tanks would actually perform against a NATO force with real battlefield experience. Next came the Type 100 medium tank, lighter than the 99B and designed for faster deployment. It fills a nice niche between heavy armor and lighter infantry fighting vehicles. It likely weighs about 45 tons and sports an unmanned turret swinging around a 105mm auto-loaded gun, along with a 12.7mm and 7.62mm machine gun for use against both ground targets and drones. The crew sits inside the heavily armored holes and controls the weapons remotely. The tank runs on a hybrid electric signature to reduce thermal signature on a battlefield dominated by thermals both on the ground and on drones. Now, the concept sounds pretty cool, but again, it's brand new. Medium tanks often end up as compromised machines, not as protected as heavy tanks, not as agile as an IFV. And with top-down attacks becoming de rigueur on the battlefield, how long will those two machine guns last? Like every other piece of Chinese tech we saw at the parade, until they see combat, it's hard to know whether the PLA has struck the right balance or just built another parade piece. Alongside the tanks were the new Type 100 support vehicles built to work alongside the tanks and cover their weaker areas. They are built on the same chassis as the Type 100, but instead of a 105mm gun, they feature a 30mm autocannon and the same heavier armor as the Type 100. The Global Times noted at the parade that the newly debuted Type 100 tank and support vehicle both have a futuristic look, with multiple types of photoelectric sensors installed on the turret and the vehicle body, and both are equipped with a remote weapon station and active protection systems. The support vehicle version notably doesn't have any anti-tank missiles, which is curious for a tank with such a small caliber gun. One thing that the support vehicle does have, though, is a spot for a rotor wing drone to sit at the rear of the vehicle. This could greatly increase the battlefield awareness between the Type 100 and its networked support vehicles. Maybe the most interesting thing, though, was the headgear the crews were wearing. They seemed to be wearing some sort of futuristic augmented reality headset. That sounds pretty neat, but who knows? I remember back in 2018, the Russians displayed a battle robot at a technology forum, but there was just a guy named Boris inside of it. After the tanks had their time in the spotlight, the ZTL-11 assault gun vehicle took center stage. This 8-wheeled gun platform resembles an American Striker or an Italian Centauros. The concept is solid. Provide rapid and maneuverable big gun support for infantry if they need to break down a wall or blast a bunker. But while the concept makes sense, as we saw with the Striker, the application is kind of hard to figure out. Strikers were divided between infantry squads, put into their own squad, used as a quick reaction force. Nothing seemed to work. In Poland, a similar concept was considered, and the Poles scrapped the idea. Because if you're going to put a large gun on what is basically an armored truck, it's a target. And not being a tank suffers in terms of survivability. The ZTL-11 is based on the Type 08 chassis, and that's interesting. The Type 08 comes in 33 different flavors if you count the list on Wikipedia. Everything from off-road armored ambulances to this tank killer gunship that we see here. The Type 08 family, and therefore the ZTL-11, are all fully amphibious, which is impressive. But like we saw with the Striker, deployed by the most experienced military in the world, it's hard to find a place for this weapon. Even so, the Chinese have them, and they don't mind showing them off. The Norinco ZBL-09 is another variation of the Type 08-09 family, but this one is an infantry fighting vehicle, so its job is to give a squad of 7 soldiers an armored ride into combat, and then provide cover and fire support once they get there. It is fitted with a 30mm gun, 7.62mm coaxial machine gun, and 3 anti-tank missiles. It can withstand 12.7mm shells to its sloped frontal armor and 7.62 to the side armor, so it's not exactly bulletproof, but it does provide protection from small arms fires and shrapnel, and is certainly better than nothing. Next on the parade rundown, we have the PLL-09 self-propelled howitzer, another of the Type 08-09 family, this time in a field artillery variant. Remember before when I told you these Type 08 chassis come in 33 flavors? They do. That's like 2 more than Baskin-Robbins. Anyway, there's not really much to say. It's a Norinco 8x8 with a 122mm howitzer on top. Moving on. The next vehicle the PLA unveiled was a new generation of tracked airborne combat vehicles, designed to be dropped from Y-20 transport aircraft, transforming lightly equipped paratroopers into mobile armored strike forces once they hit the ground. The vehicles include an armored personnel carrier, lightly armed but with missiles, a grenade launcher, and a machine gun. Also an infantry fighting vehicle with anti-tank guided missiles and a 30mm autocannon. This last new airborne assault vehicle was a tracked mortar system for indirect fire. A classic, but useful in combat when the opponent is dug in and not in line of sight. Together, they're a modular platform that can be configured for fire support, reconnaissance, or logistics, forming self-contained combined arms teams with airborne troops. All 3 feature both reactive plating and active defense systems, remote-controlled weapon stations, and enhanced situational awareness from advanced photoelectric sensors. Chinese analysts framed the debut as a leap forward in mobility, survivability, and battlefield automation, claiming it gives the PLA's airborne troops a genuine armored edge when operating behind enemy lines. The next thing to roll by was a long-range artillery formation. But long-range artillery is long-range artillery, and it has been for a century. The munitions are the really interesting part, but that's a discussion for a different day. Following the long-range artillery were the PCL-191 Multiple Launch Rocket Systems, or MLRS, known internationally as the PHL-16. It's relatively new, having entered service in 2019. It's a system mounted on an 8x8 truck chassis that operates in batteries of 6 trucks, each with 8 launchers, so a battery has up to 48 missiles in a salvo. The battery also includes a command and control vehicle, multiple carrier trucks for reloads, a meteorological truck, and support vehicles for maintenance or recovery if needed. The launchers are arranged with 2 rows of 4 launchers or 2 larger launchers for 750mm missiles. This is a refinement of the AR-3 MRL from Norinco, which has been exported since 2010. It can be loaded with different types of missiles, including 300mm and 370mm rockets. It can also be configured with a 750mm Fire Dragon tactical ballistic missile, or a TL-7B anti-ship missile. Its farthest range accurate tests with 750mm missiles were at approximately 500 kilometers, outranging the US HIMARS. This one is a formidable weapon, and it's up there with the best international MLRS. Next up to entertain Xi Jinping and his gang of goons was the HHQ-9C Naval Air Defense Missile. It can be fired from surface ships at sea. The difference between it and the regular HQ-9 is that it has a new booster. It is a derivative of the Russian S-300 series, but it also features a track via missile or TVM guidance system that is analogous to the system used on the US MM-104 Patriot missile, because they likely bought one from Israel or Germany to reverse engineer. The missile has a range of up to 300 kilometers and, with its American and Israeli knockoff guidance, is extremely accurate. This missile is around 6.8 meters long and weighs around 2 tons with a solid-fuel single-stage motor. It has been pretty widely exported too, with Morocco, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, and Egypt all buying in on the concept. A lot of Chinese weapons see limited export, so this one must be important. It is capable of shooting down ballistic missiles at both long range and in their terminal flight phase, and is pretty similar in performance to the PAC-3 Patriot. Though it hasn't been used in combat by the PLA, its widespread export since 2001 should indicate that it's a formidable weapon, especially knowing how the Patriot performs, and that the HQ-9 borrowed heavily from the Patriot's guidance system. Next was the HQ-16C. It's primarily a naval medium-range interceptor missile, but it can also be fired from land, and is an improved derivative of the Russian Buk missile family. It was developed by the Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Science, and should have a longer range than earlier missiles. It launches vertically using a cold launch start, where it's ejected from its canister using a compressed inert gas, probably nitrogen. After launch, it uses semi-active homing to reach its target. Following that was the HQ-10A, a short-range missile with an articulated launcher that points directly at a target with surprising speed. Its launcher can hold 24 HQ-10s, and reportedly has a reaction time of 6 to 8 seconds, and will launch within 10 seconds. The missile uses imaging infrared, or IIR, to find their target, and a range of about 9 kilometers. The HQ-10 system has been in service since 2013, but the PLA Victory Day Parade was the first time we've seen the A variant. Okay, now we're getting into the space-age stuff. The LY-1 is a ship and ground-capable high-energy laser weapon system. We don't know much about it, but similar weapons like the Iron Beam in Israel and the Trysup in Ukraine have shown us that laser weapons can work with incredible accuracy and decent range. I don't know much more about this laser, but a similar system was successfully tested in 2024 on a Type 071 amphibious transport of the People's Liberation Army Navy. A lot of countries are developing concentrated energy weapons, including the United States, India, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Turkey. Following the LY-1 was a formation of 4 anti-ship missiles. The ramjet-powered YJ-15 supersonic cruise missile with a 4-inlet design to fuel the reaction inside the missile. This is the first time we've seen the missile, so very little is known about it. Next was the YJ-19 hypersonic anti-ship missile, which uses an air-fed scramjet engine to reach speeds of Mach 10 or higher. It can reportedly change course during flight at this speed, but I'm pretty skeptical of that claim. As speed increases, maneuverability goes out the window. The same can be said for an anti-ship ballistic missile we'll talk about later. Again, this is the first time we've seen the weapon, so very little is known. And we already know the Chinese military has a penchant for a propaganda spin. The third missile in this high-tech quartet was the YJ-17, which features a hypersonic glide vehicle attached to a booster stage. The idea is that the glide vehicle is powered up to insane speeds and then separates and uses aerodynamic forces to maneuver to its targets. I don't know what the utility of this approach is, and again, the missile is brand new, so we'll have to wait for the invasion of Taiwan to find out, I guess. The last missile in this formation is the aeroballistic YJ-20. By aeroballistic, we mean that the missile follows a parabolic trajectory, meaning it doesn't fire straight for the target. It goes up and then it comes back down, fast. Picture the harder levels of Angry Birds, right? It is claimed to be able to maneuver up to terminal impact, but again, at hypersonic speeds, maneuver is nearly impossible. I would be really surprised if anyone has solved this problem. So that's 4 missiles that all take very different approaches to the same challenge of sinking a warship. Out of all of them, I believe that the YJ-15 is the most realistic. The other ones seem a bit far-fetched, but hey, I'm no rocket scientist. Next came the underwater weapons, and what started the show was a smaller torpedo called the AMB-012. It is a response to advancements in submarine technology, allowing subs to operate in shallow waters close to the shore. It's meant to be launched from airplanes and surface ships. It will likely replace the aging YU-7 lightweight torpedo, which has been around since like the 90s. Following that, the plan showcased another lightweight torpedo, but this one with rocket assistance. The AJC-015 is canister-launched from a ship's deck, and will likely be used on the Type 056A corvette and Type 054A and B frigate, since they already have the deck-mounted canister. It seems likely that it could also be launched from an airplane. Moving on, we have the AQA-010, a heavy torpedo, which is a 533mm torpedo that would fit in a Chinese Navy submarine launch tube, replacing the YU-6 torpedo they are currently equipped with. The last torpedo on our list wasn't really a torpedo at all. The AQS-003A is more of a torpedo-shaped underwater mobile mine that can be launched out of a 533mm tube, not unlike the American Mark 67 submarine-launched mobile mine. Displayed next were 6 anti-air missile systems with various capabilities and ranges. Up first, we've got the HQ-11 terminal defense system. The HQ-11 is a short to medium-range system that combines 8 vertically launched FM-3000 missile canisters with a Type 1130 Gatling gun for close-in support. The missiles have a range of approximately 30 kilometers against aircraft and 20 kilometers against missiles, using inertial guidance, command guidance, as well as active radar homing. The system is mounted on an 8x8 chassis and is accompanied by a radar truck with a rotary phased array radar. It's a lot like the Russian Pantsir S-1, although the Pantsir combines the radar to make just one truck that can operate independently. Then there's the HQ-9C we've already talked about, and its naval counterpart, the HHQ-9C. But the HQ-9C is a truck-mounted system, with each 8-wheeled truck having 4 launchers that direct to vertical before firing. The HQ-9C also doesn't have a booster stage like its shipborne cousin. And since we don't have much to say about the rocket itself, we could talk about where indigenous Chinese anti-air missiles came from in the first place. China's modern anti-air missile program actually started with Soviet help in the 1950s, when Moscow provided the S-75 Dvina systems, known in the West as the SA-2, the same type that downed Gary Power's U-2 over the Ural Mountains. But the Sino-Soviet split in the early 1960s cut off that pipeline, leaving Beijing to copy and tinker with the SA-2 designs for decades under the name Hongqi, or HQ, or Red Banner series. That's where all the missiles we're discussing get their name. Progress was slow and plagued by political upheaval during the Cultural Revolution, and China remained far behind Soviet and American air defense technology. Only in the 1990s, with renewed access to Russian tech, did China begin modernizing towards the more advanced HQ-9, which blends elements of the S-300 with homegrown improvements and reverse-engineered Western technology. Okay, now back to the show. Next in line, we saw the HQ-20 missile system, which is a truck-mounted system capable of carrying at least 8 smaller interceptor missiles. This is the first time it's been seen in public, and it resembles the HQ-9 series, but with skinnier missiles. Not much is known about the systems, but analysts predict it is a medium-range system that falls between the HQ-11 and the HQ-22 that we'll be discussing next. The HQ-22 has been deployed since 2019 and is a medium to long-range system, with a range of 100 kilometers with the FK-3 missiles or up to 170 kilometers with the HQ-22. Similar to how the US Patriot systems use both PAC-2 and PAC-3 missiles, depending on ranges and targets. An HQ-22 battery consists of 4 to 8 transporter erector launchers and a radar command truck that can track up to 6 targets at a time. The missile itself uses semi-active radar guidance, but can switch to command guidance from the radar truck in environments where radar jamming is prevalent. In 2019, Serbia purchased several HQ-22 units, making it the first Chinese missile system to be exported to Europe. In 2021, India reported that Chinese HQ-22 units had been deployed near the border of Ladakh. Talk about friendly neighbors. After the HQ-22, we get into a couple of very interesting anti-ballistic missiles, starting with the HQ-19. The HQ-19 is China's next-generation anti-ballistic missile, or ABM, and anti-satellite, or ASAT, system, developed as an advanced variant of the HQ-9 long-range surface-to-air missile. Developed under the 863 program beginning in the 1990s, it was first successfully tested in 1999, with early trials confirming its capability to engage targets at high altitudes and high speed. The system entered limited operational status around 2018 and was publicly revealed at the 2024 Zhuhai Air Show. Designed to intercept both medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles during their mid-course and terminal phases, is, at an altitude of up to 200 kilometers, the HQ-19 is considered comparable to the US THAAD system and is reportedly capable against ICBMs and low-orbit satellites. The system combines radar and infrared guidance and is powered by dual-pulsed, two-stage solid propellant rocket engine that achieves a specific impulse of approximately 260 seconds. The missile employs a direct-impact kinetic kill vehicle framed by carbon fiber composites capable of enduring up to 60 Gs during maneuvers. The question of G-forces is going to come up later in the discussion, so keep that number of 60 Gs in your brain. As of June 2025, Pakistan has announced plans to acquire the HQ-19, indicating growing international interest in China's missile defense technology. The next anti-ballistic missile shown was probably the most interesting item in the parade to me, the HQ-29. The HQ-29 is a massive 7.5-meter-long missile designed to intercept ballistic missiles mid-course in space, before they re-enter the atmosphere. With a reported range of over 500 kilometers, it is roughly comparable to the IRM-161 SM-3 Block 2A employed by the United States for mid-course anti-ballistic missile defense or potential satellite hunting. There isn't much information available about the missile, but the fact that we are moving our battles into space is kind of profound. 100 years ago, the car was pretty much new, and people in rural areas were still pulling carts with horses. It's mind-boggling how far we've come so quickly, and our style of warfare reflects that. Even though these are weapons of war, they make me genuinely proud of my humanity. Following the missiles, we saw the Dongfeng Mengshi all-terrain vehicle, kind of like a Humvee, but with 6 wheels. Mounted with a 10-kilowatt laser. A Type 625 air defense truck was shown next, with a 25mm rotary autocannon and man-pad missiles for defense against small or close aerial targets. Then there was an FK-3000, a larger air defense truck with a 30mm autocannon and up to 96 small surface-to-air missiles. Then another laser, around 50 kilowatts. And finally, trucks with huge waffle arrays on top of them, which were announced as a type of short-range microwave weapon for frying an area of drones without targeting a specific one. That was the last of the anti-air systems. And next, we're going to look at another incredible feat of human engineering. Next to pass by the grandstands was a procession of advanced unmanned and autonomous systems. A lot of the technology seemed very aspirational, and much of it developmental, but the Chinese government, as far as we can trust them, claims all of these systems are currently deployed. The first unmanned system we see is called the ZRY-222. It's a small-tracked combat robot that looked to be about 1.5 meters long with machine guns and missiles. Following it was the ZRZ-100, which is an 8-wheeled small tank with a turret and a machine gun. It looks a lot like a miniature of the Puma armored car the Germans fielded in World War II. Behind it came a slightly larger unmanned tracked mine-clearing vehicle. And last was the CWB-221 utility vehicle, which is a 6-wheeled flat-top platform, holding a fairly large quadcopter and flanked by 2 robot dogs, which are used for reconnaissance in rough terrain. Not much is known about these weapons, but Ukraine has had a lot of success deploying similar small robot tanks, so the concept seems solid. Next came the unmanned naval weapons, and leading the way was the HSU-100. It is a 15-meter-long submarine with no conning tower. Instead, it has retractable sensors and antenna, probably for gathering intelligence and reconnaissance missions. Behind it was an unmanned patrol boat whose name we don't know. It has space in the rear for sensors, either a passive sensor to detect submarines or an active sonar to find mines. The last maritime unmanned system to parade was the AJX-002 submersible. It is as long as the HSU-100, but much narrower. Chinese commenters pointed out that it likely uses pump jet technology to reduce its acoustic signature and point out the cruciform rudders, likely for performing tight maneuvers on the seafloor. It lacked the sensors and antenna of the HSU-100. Following the naval unmanned vehicles were the aerial UAVs, starting with the GJ-21, a large, futuristic flying wing design. It is a ground attack drone with a tailless body and a very stealthy-looking shape. It's an update of the GJ-11 sharp sword design that first flew in 2013. And we have much more information on the GJ-11, which we can confirm has a covered ducted engine outlet for its single turbofan engine, 2 internal weapons bays, and a 14-meter wingspan. Next up was the Chengdu GJ-2, which is a shape we're all familiar with. It resembles an American Reaper drone and fulfills the very same function of loitering, surveillance, and attacking ground targets with a variety of missiles and rockets. It's no surprise and has been in service with the PLA since 2017. Behind came 4 unmanned fighter jets of various types. Type A is a tailless Lambda wing. Type B is a tailless Delta wing. Type D is a canted tail Delta wing with supposed manned-unmanned capability, meaning it's supposedly a force multiplier in combat and can be tasked by the human team to attack targets. The West has a similar program in Loyal Wingman Advanced Development Program, which has led to the development of the Boeing MQ-28 Ghostbat. The final unmanned fighter we saw was the Type E, a canted tail swept wing design, also for man-unmanned integration. The final piece of unmanned flying technology we saw, though, was an unnamed helicopter that will likely fulfill a reconnaissance, scouting, and attack role, a lot like the American MQ-8 Fire Scout. After some logistics and maintenance formations, we get to go back to where we belong, looking at missiles. The first group of missiles were all cruise missiles, starting with the CJ-20A. It's an updated version of the CJ-20 air-launched subsonic cruise missile, which we know more about. The CJ-20 has a range of over 2,000 kilometers and is intended for ground attack. It is guided by inertial navigation, satellite navigation, terrain contour matching, as well as digital scene mapping during its terminal phase. It is launched from a Xi'an H-6 bomber, China's only bomber in service. And each bomber can carry 6 of these missiles, according to the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. We don't know if it's nuclear capable or not, since the US Air Global Strike Command says it is, and the National Air and Space Intelligence Center says it isn't. Either way, 2,000 kilometers is a long way, especially when you factor in the 3,000-kilometer range of the H-6 bomber that is carrying it. YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators. That is why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everyone should start a channel, but if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel, or a faceless YouTube channel like this one, well, now's the perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions every day, and it's pushing newer, smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure many of you have questions on how to get started and how to grow a channel. We get questions in our email all the time from some of you guys. So that's why we've decided to put all of our YouTube advice into one training bootcamp for the low, low price of completely free. So, if you're someone interested in starting your own YouTube channel, you can sign up for this bootcamp by clicking on the link in the description or on the screen. Sign up now because, unfortunately, unlike YouTube videos, the bootcamp is like a Zoom call, so it's limited to just 100 people. Okay, let's get back to the video. Next was the YJ-18C. Now, this one is tricky. It's an anti-ship glide vehicle with stubby wings and a range of about 540 kilometers, cruising to its target at a stately Mach 0.8. But in its terminal phase, it sprints up to Mach 3 before impact, relying on inertial navigation and the Chinese Beidou satellite system to find its target. It is based on the Russian Caliber missile that's caused so much damage in Ukraine. The wild part is that this particular variant is designed to be hidden inside of a shipping container. And then there's the CJ-1000, which is an air-breathing scramjet that flies at hypersonic speeds against ships or other moving targets. We don't know much about it, but Chinese military expert Xiao Yongling told the Global Times that the CJ-1000 is an upgraded version of the CJ-100, which was unveiled in 2019. Given its high speed and maneuverability, the CJ-1000 would be deployed to strike heavily defended and time-sensitive high-value targets, according to the expert. Now we get into a collection of hypersonic missiles, starting with the YJ-21, which is China's hypersonic anti-ship ballistic missile. It entered service with the People's Liberation Army Navy around 2022, and an air-launched version, the KD-22, was introduced in 2024. According to the PLA, it flies between Mach 6 in mid-course and up to Mach 10 during its terminal phase. It has a range of 1,000 to 1,500 kilometers and is equipped with inertial navigation and radar infrared seekers. Initially deployed via vertical launch systems on Type 055 destroyers, the H-6 bomber can carry up to 4 of the KD version under its wings. The DF-17 is an 11-meter-long booster that gets up to incredible speeds and then deploys the DF-ZF glide vehicle towards its target. It is projected that this weapon would be the first strike weapon in a conflict around the First Island chain, while air defenses are still intact. Because according to a US military source, it is incredibly nimble, even at speeds up to Mach 10. The same official spoke about its accuracy, being able to hit within meters of a target. The DF-26 is a formidable Chinese intermediate-range ballistic missile, often dubbed the Guam Killer, thanks to its ability to strike US bases in Guam with conventional or nuclear warheads. It has a range of 4,000 kilometers and a 2-stage solid fuel design. Standing roughly 14 meters tall and weighing about 20 tons, it is launched from transporter erector launchers mounted to trucks. The DF-26's modular payload system lets operators field either warhead type depending on the mission, and its anti-ship variant, the DF-26B, can reportedly target moving vessels with terminal guidance. China's rapid production ramp-up, estimated at about 250 operational launchers as of 2024, with more on the way, marks it as a core part of the PLA's area denial strategy in the Asia-Pacific. Analysts describe it as one of the most dangerous missiles in China's arsenal, capable of precision strikes and complicating U.S. defense planning in the event of a conflict. I am not so sure about the claim that it can hit a moving ship, though. I was a bit skeptical when I heard the claim a while back, so I did the math and I learned that a course correction of 10 kilometers, which is about how far an aircraft carrier would move in any direction immediately following a launch, since obviously it takes time to get space and time to come down, what I learned was that at Mach 10 in the thicker air inside our atmosphere would put about 530 pounds of force on a 1-meter fin. And the DF-26 is going Mach 20. So precise targeting of a moving ship that's only 250 feet wide seems more like a bit of hype to me. Again, I was using the general numbers like 10 minutes to space and 10 kilometers of random movement, but if you cross-check those numbers, they are roughly accurate for this calculation. Then there are 5 nuclear missiles: the JL-1, JL-3, DF-61, DF-31BJ, and finally the DF-5C. The September 3rd Victory Day parade was the first time we've seen the JL-1. And it's China's first publicly acknowledged nuclear-capable air-launched ballistic missile, completing its triad of land, sea, and now air delivery systems. Mounted on the H-6 bomber, the JL-1 is a 2-stage solid-fuel derivative of the DF-21 series, probably featuring 2 configurations, a double-cone tip or a hypersonic glide vehicle. Its announced effective range is up to 8,000 kilometers, significantly extending China's strike envelope thanks to the altitude and speed of the host aircraft. The JL-3 is China's 3rd-generation solid-fuel submarine-launched ballistic missile, now deployed on Type 094A Jin-class submarines, each of which can carry 12 of the JL-3s with future plans for the stealthier Type 096, and marks a significant upgrade over the older JL-2. First tested in 2018 to 2019 and officially rearmed on submarines by 2022, it was publicly revealed at the 2025 Victory Day parade. It uses a cold launch to boost out of its canister before igniting, boasting an estimated range of 9,000 to 12,000 kilometers. The JL-3 can strike the US mainland or Europe from protected waters near China. It reportedly carries multiple independent re-entry vehicles, possibly 3 to 5 warheads, or countermeasures guided by Astro-Inertial Plus BeiDou satellite systems. Astro-inertial navigation is a very interesting topic, and we should talk about it soon. This is a game-changer for China's seaborne nuclear strategy, because it lags far behind the United States and Russia in the size of its sub-fleet. It operates only 6 Type 94s, which each hold 12 missiles. While 72 intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads does sound like a lot, and it certainly is, Russia fields 13 ballistic missile submarines with 16 missiles each, which makes 208 missiles somewhere underwater around the world. The United States is similarly armed. So even though China is building boats fast, they are a ways from catching up to the other world powers in that arena. So having a long-range weapon is important to them, since the world is such a big place. Rolling in on a massive 16-wheeled carrier was the DF-61, well over 20 meters long. It is likely a replacement for the DF-41. We don't know much about what has improved, but DF-61 is believed to have a range of 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers and can carry multiple independent, targetable re-entry vehicles, making it a direct peer to America's Minuteman III or Russia's RS-24 Yars. The new DF-61 looks similar in size and deployment to the DF-41. Both of them hang out both ends of their huge canisters, which suggests it could be an evolutionary successor or a parallel design, intended to diversify China's nuclear arsenal. Though its specifications remain secret, analysts speculate it could improve upon the DF-41 with greater range, payload flexibility, or survivability. Its appearance alongside JL-3 submarine-launched missiles and the air-launched JL-1 underline the threat that Xi Jinping is making to the world. He wants to restore a myth of Chinese empire with him as a fulcrum of history. It's fitting that he watched the entire show with a man like Putin, who suffers from the same delusions, that history is wrong and that they are the men to fix it. Another parader from the People's Liberation Army rocket force was the DF-31BJ. It is another massive rocket. Though it is slightly smaller than the DF-61, it is still a big rocket. The old DF-31 was 15 meters tall, weighing at 42,000 kilograms, but the new rocket is much larger, almost as big as the DF-41. The B and J designations likely point to it being an upgrade of how it's housed. In this case, the missile is kept in launch silos, which have been popping up all over Yumen and Hami, with hundreds of silos under construction. This goes along with the dramatic increase in missile production that has been going on at the same time. These developments, along with many other military developments that the PLA couldn't parade, have Western analysts concerned. The final missile on display was probably the oldest piece of technology that China showed off, although this was an upgraded version. It was the gargantuan DF-5C, broken down into parts, because there is no vehicle in the world that could carry the whole thing, short of a crawler transporter you might find at a space launch facility. It is nearly 35 meters long, weighing nearly 200 tons, and the base model has been in service since 1980. The upgraded C version can launch 12 separate 1 megaton warheads. Now, 1 megaton doesn't sound like a lot, but to put it into perspective, the bomb Little Boy that destroyed Hiroshima was a .015 megaton bomb. So picture 12 nuclear warheads going Mach 22. Each one was 66 times the destructive force of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Absolutely chilling. And now that we're all completely frightened, let's grab our binoculars because the air show is about to begin. First up was a formation of Z-20 medium-lift utility helicopters with flags of the Chinese Communist Party, China itself, and the PLA. We've already discussed the helicopter, but the flags were interesting. Alongside the Z-20s were a pair of Chenghe Z-10 attack helicopters, which we've also discussed. Right behind the Z-20s and the Z-10s came a flight of Harbin Z-19 light attack helicopters, shaping out the number 80, this being the 80th anniversary of the end of the Pacific Theater, and with it, the final conclusion to World War II. If the Z-10 is a Chinese Apache, then the Z-19 is the Chinese Cobra. It is a tandem seat attack and recon helicopter, built to replace the Harbin Z-9, which was itself a Eurocopter Dauphin built under license. Its first flight was in 2011, and it entered service in 2012. Powered by two WZ-8 turboshaft engines, it features a 4-blade main rotor and a shrouded tail rotor, which I think looks really cool. Its avionics include a mast-mounted millimeter wave fire, control radar, a nose turret with FLIR, a TV camera, laser rangefinder, and advanced helmet-mounted sights. For such a small helicopter, it is very well armored. Its weapons are carried on stubby wings and can include HJ-8 anti-tank missiles, TY-90 air-to-air missiles, 23mm gun pods, rocket pods, etc. Though notably the Z-19 lacks an internal nose gun or autocannon like we find on the Z-10, which is unusual for attack helicopters. There's an export variant, the Z-19E, first flown in 2017, with added export interests, and upgrades consistent with international customer demand, but currently it is only flown by the PLA. The final formation of helicopters was carrying banners like the first, only this time they said justice shall prevail, peace shall prevail, and people shall prevail. They were carried by a trio of Z-8Ls. Flanking it in formation were the two Z-20Ts. The first formation of non-rotor aircraft to fly was the Airborne Early Warning and Control Group, led by a Shanxi KJ-500. The KJ-500 is China's third-generation airborne early warning and control platform, entering service around 2015. It uses a fixed 3-panel AESA radar housed in a dorsal radome above the plane. It can loiter for about 12 hours, and its radar can track 60 to 100 targets simultaneously within 470 kilometers. It recently made its first overseas deployment during the Eagles of Civilization 2025 drills in Egypt. Next was a KJ-600 AEW and C aircraft. It is a twin turboprop observation plane that bears a striking resemblance to the American E-2 Hawkeye. It's intended for use on aircraft carriers. It was first flown in 2020, but the parade was its official introduction into service. With all the delicate electronics and radar inside of it, it will require the smooth launch of the Fujian-class electromagnetic catapult, and likely can't use a ski jump takeoff. So it's an aircraft looking towards the future, not currently deployed technology. On either side of the AEW and C planes were J-16 and J-15T fighter jets. The Shenyang J-16 is China's twin-engined, tandem-seat, Generation 4.5 multi-role strike fighter developed from the Su-300 MKK airframe. Truly one of the most beautiful planes in the sky. Entering service between 2015 and 2016, it features modern upgrades to the standard Su-30. These include composite airframe components, radar-absorbent coating, a robust actively electronically scanned array, or AESA, radar, and helmet-mounted heads-up display systems. It is powered by two WS-10 turbofans, and that's an important part of this story. Not all of the J-16s are on the WS-10B engine, which is capable capable of thrust vectoring, the PLAAF still has a lot of planes on the WS-10A, which doesn't have this ability, which is important in tight maneuvers, especially at low speed. Speed isn't affected, however, and it can go Mach 2 on either engine package. It carries a 30mm cannon and has 12 external hardpoints, making it capable of a very heavy payload, including long-range PL-15 air-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, anti-radiation missiles, precision bombs, and rockets. There's also an electronic warfare SEAD variant, the J-16D, which replaces its infrared tracking system and cannon with internal electronic warfare suites and wingtip pods for electronic suppression of enemy air defenses. Operational reporting suggests, however, that its real-world range is far less than ideal when fully loaded. Air refueling has had to be used unusually close to Chinese territory, indicating persistent endurance constraints under combat conditions. Overall, analysts see the J-16 as a potent workhorse. It's not stealthy like the J-20, but perhaps more useful in serious assaults thanks to its heavy payload and flexible loadouts. The Shenyang J-15 Flying Shark is China's first domestically developed carrier-based fighter. Introduced in 2013, it was developed by the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation and is based on a Russian Su-33 prototype that the Chinese government acquired from Ukraine. It has a maximum speed of Mach 2 and can carry up to 6,000 kilograms of weapons, including PL-8 and PL-12 air-to-air missiles. The aircraft is equipped with a fly-by-wire flight control system and features a reinforced airframe to withstand the stress of carrier operations. The J-15 has been deployed on China's aircraft carriers, including the Liaoning and the Shandong. The J-15T we saw in the parade is an improved version first seen in 2016 and officially introduced in 2024. The J-15T features new radar that is compatible with advanced air-to-air missiles like the PL-10 and PL-15. The aircraft's cockpit has an upgraded heads-up display and better controls to help with catapult launches, which will become common once the Fujian class is up and running. It has also been modified for catapulted assisted takeoff but arrested recovery, or CATOBAR. The next formation to fly was the Specialist Group, all based on the Shanxi Y-9 airframe, which is a transport plane using 4 turboprops. They included an anti-submarine electronic intelligence and electronic warfare variant and were escorted by the J-16s. Following the Y-9s were a Xi'an Y-20A and Y-20B. These are heavy-lift cargo planes, basically like an American Globemaster, although their payload, at 66 tons, is less than that of the Globemaster's 77 tons. Then we saw the bombers. China only produces one bomber, the Xi'an H-6, a license-built version of the Soviet Tu-16, which has evolved far past the 70-year-old Soviet design it's licensed under. The versions in the parade were the K, J, and N. The modernized H-6K features turbofan engines, composite structural elements, an upgraded radar in the redesigned nose, and capacity for up to 6 CJ-10A cruise missiles, replacing legacy guns and glass panels. Naval use is fulfilled by the H-6J, a version of the H-6K adapted for the People's Liberation Army Navy. The H-6N further extends the platform's reach by incorporating in-flight aerial refueling and an air-launched ballistic missile capacity, visible in its distinct refueling probe. Then there were some refuelers, and finally, the fighters. The first fighter was the electronic warfare version of the J-16, the J-16D. It deletes the internal cannon and infrared search and track systems to save weight and space for advanced electronic systems. It is fitted with multiple wingtip pods and underwing electronic jamming pods, believed to house active phased array antennas for radar jamming and electronic surveillance. It also carries sensors in its modified nose radome and can employ anti-radiation missiles such as the LD-100, making it the PLA's closest equivalent to the US EA-18G Growler. Next was a formation of J-20 variants like the J-20, the J-20A, and the J-20S. The J-20 Mighty Dragon is China's first operational stealth fighter, developed by Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group for the PLA Air Force as a long-range, multi-role air superiority platform. The baseline J-20, introduced in 2017, features canard delta aerodynamics, a blended fuselage with internal weapons bays, and initial power plants of Russian AL-31 FM2 engines. If China has one major weakness in its aviation, it's their engine program. Constant redesigns, using outsourced engines, poor durability, and weak performance have plagued their engines from the start of their fighter jet development process. The Russian engine was later replaced in production with the indigenous WS-10C, and we will keep an eye on that moving forward. The J-20A, first identified in 2019, incorporates key upgrades including thrust vectoring WS-10C engines for improved maneuverability, enhanced stealth shaping with redefined redefined engine intakes and surface treatments, and upgraded avionics, bringing the aircraft closer to its intended 5th-generation performance level, although many analysts consider it more of a Gen 4.5. The J-20S, revealed in 2021, is the twin-seat variant, notable as the world's first 2-seat stealth fighter. The second crew member is there to manage the squadron, operate electronics warfare, or control unmanned combat aerial vehicles like we saw in the parade. The last fighter we see is the J-35. It is Shenyang Aircraft Corporation's second 5th-generation program, and the PLA's candidate for a twin-engine naval stealth fighter. Design highlights include blended stealth fuselage with internal weapons bays, a chin-mounted electro-optical sensor turret, sawtooth panel edges, and serrated exhaust nozzles to improve stealth. Chinese state media and program footage have claimed internal carriages of up to 6 missiles. Open analysis also notes shifts in engine types across prototypes and changes in body shapes. Flight tests have continued throughout 2024 and 2025, but the plane looks eerily familiar to an F-35, and when we look at the entire parade, we've actually seen a lot of intellectual property that was either salvaged from wreckage, bought on the black market, or just outright stolen. In fact, the reason the J-15 exists is because the Chinese reverse-engineered an Su-27, and were no longer allowed to buy the planes they had ordered. So what did they do? They bought a broken-down prototype of an Su-33 from Ukraine and reverse-engineered that too. And that brings us to our final point: Chinese industrial espionage. On industrial espionage, U.S. prosecutors charged and obtained a guilty plea from Chinese national Su Bin for his role in a conspiracy to hack into U.S. defense contractors and steal sensitive aircraft data. The Department of Justice and the FBI say Su worked with co-conspirators to obtain and translate protected technical files relating to multiple U.S. platforms, including the C-17 transport and advanced stealth fighters like the F-22 and F-35, and that he sent those materials to Chinese military and aviation contacts. Su pleaded guilty in March of 2016 and was later sentenced in the U.S. criminal case. The U.S. government has used this case as an example of the PLA-linked targeting of aerospace intellectual property. In regard to the J-35, U.S. officials and many commentators pointed out that cases like Su Bin are part of a broader pattern of Chinese cyber and supply chain espionage documented over the last decade that has supplied China with engineering data, test protocols, and design documents that materially accelerated Chinese programs' learning curves. Throughout this parade, we saw some awesome technology, but how much of it is really Chinese?